3 tomato seedlings dead in a week, the lemon tree stripped bare. The kale you planted so carefully turned into dry stalks before it could even produce its first leaf. And on the ground, that brown trail of leafcutter ants vanishes into the earth as if nothing had happened. You've been through this before. I know because I've been there too, and the worst part isn't losing the plant. It is what comes next. You go to the store, buy the most expensive poison. On the shelf, pour it into the anthill, seal it, and wait. 16 days later, the same trail, the same path, the same ants are carrying what is left of your garden back into the ground. It is as if you had done nothing at all. Then you try again, another product, another method. Someone suggests a different powder, a spray, or a recipe they found online. You apply it, it works for a few days, and then they return. They always return. In the comments of videos like this, there are people who have tested 6 or 7 different solutions and are still stuck in the same place. People who lost an entire orchard in a single night, one night. People who gave up on planting altogether because they got tired of feeding ants instead of feeding their families. In my records of regional soil health, I found that this cycle of failure isn't a lack of effort, it is a system built to sell you the next solution rather than provide you with the final one. And you know what nobody tells you? Every time you dump a strong chemical into that soil, you aren't just trying to kill ants. You are killing everything that makes that earth function. The poison doesn't choose a target, it bulldozes over everything. And the soil that remains is poorer, harder, and more dependent on the next product you'll be forced to buy. It is a loop you spend to solve. It doesn't solve it. The soil gets worse, the problem returns stronger. And you spend again. This isn't due to your lack of competence in the backyard. You are trapped in a game where the rules were written for you to lose. Slowly, buying product after product while your soil dies underneath your feet. The most absurd part, the answer that actually works against leafcutters costs less than a cup of coffee. It is in your pantry right now. And the ants themselves will do the work of carrying it into the nest, without ever suspecting a thing. But before we get to that, you need to understand why everything they've sold you so far has failed. If you don't understand the trap, you will fall into it again. Tell me in the comments, how many times have you thought you solved the ant problem only for them to reappear as if nothing happened? Through my field observations, I've noted that when you see that trail devouring everything, the first thing industry pushes is a bucket of ant poison. You buy it, you apply it. The nest disappears for 16 days, and then it comes back. You buy again, apply again. The cycle never stops. No one tells you that this poison doesn't solve the problem, because it is part of the problem. Every time you dump ant poison into the soil, you aren't just killing ants, you are destroying an invisible network of fungi living beneath your feet, a web that connects root to root, distributes nutrients, and warns neighboring plants when an attack is coming. This network is the immune system of your backyard, and the ant poison burns it like a weed. The same logic applies to the synthetic fertilizer you buy in a bag. It forces the plant to grow fast, looking beautiful on the outside, but weak on the inside. Why? Because when you dump synthetic nitrogen into the soil, the plant stops negotiating with the fungi. It no longer needs to trade sugar for phosphorus, it no longer needs that underground partnership, and the fungus, receiving nothing, dies. Then the plant is left alone, addicted to the next dose exactly like a drug. And you become dependent on the next purchase. Now put it all together, the poison that kills the fungal network, the fertilizer that addicts the plant, the lime thrown in without analysis that unbalances the pH, and the earth turned over with a hoe. That exposes the living layer where billions of microorganisms live to the sun. Every one of these practices sold to you as caring for the land is actually an aggression. In my case logs, I've seen the result: weak plants, strong pests, and an empty wallet. There are people who spent more on ant poison in a year than they would have spent buying fruit at the market. And the nest remains there, firm, because no one attacked the real cause. The real cause is dead soil. Dead soil cannot defend itself. In healthy ground with ground cover, diversity, and an intact fungal network, the leaf cutter ant exists, but it doesn't explode. It is part of the system. It doesn't dominate. Balance dominates, but you can T-cell balance in a 22-kilogram bag at the farm store. That is why, when someone discovers that a handful of raw rice does what the expensive poison couldn't, the reaction Is anger not relief? Anger at having spent so much, at having poisoned their own backyard, at having followed label advice instead of observing what the earth was asking. For the rice method works precisely because it doesn't attack the soil. It uses the ant's own logic against the colony without burning anything around it. But to understand why this works, you first need to understand something nobody taught you about what happens underground when you stop poisoning it. In my study of subsoil systems, I define this as the soil internet. Beneath every centimeter of healthy soil, there is a mesh of microscopic fungi connecting root to root and tree to seedling. A fungal thread thinner than a human hair wraps around the root of your tomato plant. That thread stretches, crosses centimeters of earth, and connects to the root of a bean plant on the other side of the bed. When the tomato has extra phosphorus and the bean needs it, the fungus transfers it. When the bean fixes nitrogen from the air and the tomato can't, the fungus carries it over. It is exchange, transport, and communication. No labels, no packaging, and zero cost. Now think about what happens when you pour liquid poison into an anthill. That product doesn't stop at the ant. It seeps, penetrates, and kills everything in its path. Bacteria that decompose organic matter, dead. Fungi that feed the roots, dead. Nematodes that control soil pests, dead. You solve the ant for 17 days and fired the entire maintenance team that kept your soil functioning. It is like firing the entire maintenance department of a building because a faucet was dripping. In 2 months, the pipes burst, the elevator stops, and the roof starts leaking. Here is the connection I've identified in my records. The leafcutter ant is a fungus farmer. Inside the nest, she maintains a subterranean garden, feeding her fungus with the pieces of leaves she carries. She realized millions of years ago that the fungus is the center of everything. But when the surrounding soil is alive, with the entire mycorrhizal network functioning, the ant faces natural resistance. Plants well nourished by the network produce compounds the ant avoids. Balanced soil keeps natural predators of the ant nearby. The system regulates itself. But when you spend years throwing poison and breaking this web, the soil is left naked inside. No defense, no network, no balance. The ant returns, and she returns with more force because now there is nothing holding her back. The problem was never just the ant. The problem is that we erased the code nature had already written to deal with her. And that code isn't on any product label or farm store advertisement. It is there, invisible, waiting for you to stop destroying it so it can start functioning again. The question is, how much have you already spent trying to kill ants without knowing you were killing the only thing that could truly help you? Imagine looking at the nest on the 5th day and seeing what you've never seen before: ants leaving and returning without carrying anything, walking in circles. A full trail one moment, empty the next. It looks like confusion. That is exactly what it is. The entire colony functions as a single organism. And when the center of that organism fails, the behavior of the whole group shifts. It is like a farm that loses its water source. No one knows where to go. Production stops, the system collapses, and you know what caused all this: raw rice. Not a bucket, not a complicated technique, just grains of rice scattered along the trail. Replenished every 2 days for a week. That is all. You don't need equipment, and you don't need expensive poison. That contaminates your garden only to fail again in 17 days. You don't even have to worry about the chickens or the dog in the yard, because rice leaves no residue and has no strong smell. My experimental data shows the trick is that you aren't attacking the ant, you are using her labor against the nest itself. The ant carries the grain inside, thinking it is good material for the fungus that feeds the colony. But the rice, once in contact with that humid environment below, generates a different type of fungus, a competitor. This competitor begins to suffocate the original fungus. No original fungus means no food. No food means no colony. In my logs, I've found the detail that separates those who succeed from those who give up. Most people place the rice near the eye of the nest, the mound of loose earth at the main opening. But the trail can start 11 or 16 meters away. If you only throw rice at the door, very little reaches the heart of the nest. If you distribute it along the entire path, the volume entering daily multiplies, and volume is what decides the speed of the collapse. The other error is stopping too early. After 2 days of rice, people think they've solved it because they see fewer ants. They haven't. It is like stopping your medicine because your fever dropped 1 degree. The fungus inside is still alive. 8 days minimum, 11 if the nest is large. Consistency kills more colonies than quantity. And if your yard is vast, there is a reinforcement that costs nothing, sesame or eucalyptus leaves at the edge of the beds. The leaf cutter does not like crossing these plants. It is not a wall, but it reduces the pressure while the rice does the internal work. Perceive what happened here. You didn't need to do more. You needed to do less, but in the right place at the right time. For the right duration, the system did the rest. I am currently tracking the efficacy of these homegrown interventions. Tell me in the comments, have you ever tried a home method against ants that either worked or failed? I want to know what you've tested on your own land. Think of a scene that has happened before and will happen again. Empty store shelves, lines at the door, people pushing carts with wide eyes trying to secure the basics. Now think of yourself on that same day. But instead of getting in the car to fight over the last wilted head of lettuce, you go to the backyard, pull out a kale plant born without poison, and pick tomatoes that the ants didn't touch because you understood how they function. That difference isn't luck, it is a decision. What you learned here isn't just a trick. With rice, it is the beginning of a different logic. When you observe the ant trail before acting, when you understand the target is the fungus inside, when you make those 3 reinforcement applications on alternate days to ensure the colony doesn't resprout in a deeper secondary branch, you aren't just controlling a pest, you are taking command of your piece of land. And those who command their own land do not depend on any store shelf. Some people spent 22 years throwing expensive poison and buying lettuce for $1.75. That was sprayed with the same chemicals that failed in their yard. That cycle isn't your incompetence, it is a system that profits. When you stop producing and return to the supermarket aisle, every time you solve a problem with what you already have at home, you step out of that cycle. In my ultimate analysis, those who grew up in the countryside know the earth responds slowly, but it responds with abundance. When you work alongside it, it is not romanticism, it is mathematics. A bag of rice solves the nest, mulch feeds the soil feeds the plant feeds you. All of this without depending on a store, a brand, or freight. This isn't a weekend hobby, it is the difference between panicking during the next crisis and eating peacefully from your own backyard. And that difference begins today with what you have in your pantry. I am building a record of self-sufficient successes. What was the first problem you solved in your backyard without needing to buy anything? Whether it was ants, pests, or hard soil. I want to read what worked in your reality.